The room was electric with tension, laughter cutting through the hum of conversation when she dropped the bombshell. "Well, let's just say the passion isn't dead," Nora said with a sly smile, raising her glass, "even if it's not with who you'd expect." The guests fell silent, forks pausing mid-air as her words landed like a grenade. Jack's hand tightened around his glass, the air buzzing in his ears. She was bragging about her affair in front of their closest friends? His heart pounded, blood roaring in his veins. He stood abruptly, his chair screeching against the floor. "If that's the game we're playing, Nora, maybe everyone deserves to hear the whole story." What followed left every jaw at the table hanging. But before we dive deeper into this shocking story, let us know where you're tuning in from in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more jaw-dropping tales like this. The aroma of baked chicken wafted through the cozy kitchen, mingling with the faint hum of the dishwasher. Jack glanced around the dinner table, his two kids chatting animatedly about their day at school. Their laughter filled the room, bouncing off the warm beige walls. Yet to Jack, something felt off. The familiar scene of family dinners, a ritual he held dear, carried an undercurrent of tension that he couldn't quite place. Nora sat at the other end of the table, her soft smile perfectly rehearsed as she passed the mashed potatoes to their youngest Emily. Her auburn hair framed her face like it always did, but tonight, Jack noticed how her eyes darted toward her lap more often than usual. He tried to shake the thought, telling himself he was imagining things. "Daddy, can we go to the park tomorrow?" Emily asked, her fork clattering against her plate. "Of course, sweetheart," Jack replied, his voice steady, though his gaze lingered on Nora. Nora's phone buzzed softly, a barely audible vibration that would have gone unnoticed if Jack hadn't been watching. She stiffened. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Jack saw it. For just a second, her expression faltered, a fleeting look of guilt, or maybe fear, before she quickly recovered, flashing him a tight smile. "What's up, babe?" she asked casually, reaching for her glass of water. Jack hesitated. "Nothing," he said, forcing a grin. "Just thinking about work." He hated lying, but the gnawing suspicion in his gut held him back. He glanced at her again as she picked up her phone, angling it just slightly away from his view. She tapped something quickly, her movements hurried and deliberate. Then she put the phone face down on the table, like she always did these days. The warmth of the room suddenly felt stifling. Jack's chest tightened as he sipped his water, the edges of his vision narrowing as his thoughts spiraled. Was he overthinking? Or was there something she wasn't telling him? Nora's laughter broke through his haze, light and melodic, as she joined in a joke their son had made, but to Jack, it sounded hollow, forced. As dinner wound down, Jack found himself clearing the table, his mind swirling with unanswered questions. Nora excused herself, saying she needed to check on something upstairs, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Jack stood in the kitchen, gripping a damp dish towel, replaying her subtle, almost imperceptible actions over and over in his head. He wasn't the type to pry, he prided himself on trusting his wife implicitly. But tonight, something gnawed at him, sharper than he wanted to admit. He walked toward the dining table, glancing at the empty space where Nora had been sitting. His eyes fell on her phone, now abandoned on the counter. It buzzed once. Jack's heart thudded in his chest. He wasn't sure why he felt compelled to look. Maybe it was the faint voice in the back of his mind whispering that this wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. Maybe it was the nagging doubt that had taken root over the past few months, growing silently beneath the surface. He stepped closer, his hands clammy. Another buzz. "Stop it," he muttered under his breath, shaking his head. He wasn't going to be that guy, the insecure, jealous husband who sneaked through his wife's phone. He reached for a plate, ready to distract himself with the mundane task of cleaning up, when he heard the soft creak of the stairs. Nora's footsteps. She was coming back. He turned just as she entered the kitchen, her gaze flicking from him to her phone. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice light, but there was something guarded in her tone. "Yeah," Jack said, forcing himself to smile. just finishing up." She crossed the room and picked up her phone, her fingers curling around it protectively. For a moment, their eyes met, and Jack thought he saw something there. Something that made the hairs on the back of his neck rise. She froze. Just for a second, but he saw it. "I'm going to take this upstairs," Nora said, her voice a little too casual. "Work stuff." Jack nodded, watching her retreat. As she disappeared, he leaned against the counter, exhaling slowly. His mind was a battlefield, torn between rationality and the sinking feeling that his life was beginning to unravel. This wasn't paranoia, it was something more. He could feel it. The house was quiet later that night, the soft hum of the dishwasher the only sound breaking the silence. Jack sat on the couch with his laptop, a stack of unpaid bills spread out in front of him. He hated this chore, sorting through utilities, expenses, and subscriptions, but tonight it was a welcome distraction. As he scrolled through the phone bill, his eyes snagged on a number that appeared over and over again. He frowned, leaning closer. It wasn't one he recognized. It didn't belong to Nora's co-workers or any family members he could recall. Yet there it was, called and texted repeatedly, often late at night. His stomach twisted. He told himself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe it was a client. Maybe it was harmless. But as he stared at the number, doubt gnawed at him. He copied it into his phone and hesitated, his thumb hovering over the call button. The room suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in. His heart pounded, the rhythm echoing in his ears. With a deep breath, he tapped the screen. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. He clenched the phone tighter, feeling the sweat on his palm. "Hello?" a man's voice answered. Jack froze. His mouth went dry as he struggled to form words. Hi, I think I must have the wrong number," he stammered, his voice cracking slightly. "No worries," the man said, his tone casual, even friendly. But then there was a pause, just long enough to stretch the tension tight. "Wait, is this Jack?" Jack's pulse spiked. "Yes," he said, his voice barely audible. "Who is this?" The man chuckled softly, the sound grating against Jack's ears. "Oh," he said, his voice carrying a hint of familiarity now. "Hey, babe, miss me?" Jack's breath hitched. His grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles turned white. For a moment the world seemed to tilt, his vision narrowing as the man's words replayed in his head like a sinister echo. He hung up without saying another word, his hands trembling. His stomach churned as the weight of that voice settled in his chest. Everything felt wrong. The night's quiet had turned deafening, and Jack's thoughts swirled like a storm threatening to pull him under. Jack sat in the dimly lit living room, staring at the blank TV screen. His mind wandered, retreating to a time when things were simpler, happier. Memories unfolded like pages from an old photo album, vivid and bittersweet. He could almost hear her laughter, the way it used to bubble up, unrestrained and infectious. It was a sound that could light up the darkest of days. He remembered one summer evening, years ago, when they'd danced barefoot in the backyard after putting the kids to bed. The grass had been damp with dew, the warm glow of string lights casting a soft halo over her. She'd twirled in his arms, her hair catching the light as they laughed like teenagers. Those moments felt like they belonged to another lifetime. Back then, Nora's joy had been radiant, a force that seemed unshakable. Shifting in his seat, Jack let his head fall into his hands. The memories shifted too, forward in time to their 10th wedding anniversary. He had planned a surprise dinner at their favorite Italian restaurant, complete with a handwritten letter that took him hours to get just right. He still remembered the look in her eyes as she read it, tears welling as she reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "You always know how to make me feel so loved," she'd whispered that night, her voice soft but full of emotion. He'd believed her. Now, that memory felt distant, hazy. When was the last time she'd looked at him like that? He couldn't remember. Jack stood, pacing the room. Another memory surfaced, unbidden but sharp as glass. It was a family road trip to the Grand Canyon, their kids still small enough to fit snugly in their booster seats. The car had been filled with the smell of Nora's homemade granola bars and the sound of her singing along to the radio, off-key but unapologetic. They'd pulled over at a scenic overlook, Nora chasing the kids through the wildflowers while Jack snapped pictures. She'd turned toward him, her cheeks flushed from laughter, and blown him a kiss. That image felt like a punch to the chest. The woman in that memory was so far removed from the one who now guarded her phone like a secret. Her laughter had become rare, her touch fleeting. She used to reach for his hand instinctively. Now, even when they sat together, she seemed miles away. The sharp contrast stung. He thought about the mornings when she used to wake him with a kiss on the forehead, whispering something sweet before starting the day. These days, she was up before him, slipping out of bed without a word. The warmth between them had been replaced by a chill he didn't know how to thaw. Jack leaned against the window, staring out into the dark. The memories came faster now, a cascade of what was and what would never be again. Their laughter, their inside jokes, the unspoken bond they once shared. It all felt like it had evaporated, leaving only this strange, hollow distance. How had they gotten here? The question echoed in his mind, but no answers came. Just the cold realization that something fundamental had changed, and he had no idea how to get it back. The unease lingered, a shadow that followed Jack through his days and deep into the nights. It wasn't just the phone call or her guarded expressions. It was the growing pile of inconsistencies he could no longer ignore. It started with the work dinners. Nora's schedule seemed busier than ever, with late-night meetings and last-minute projects popping up almost weekly. Jack had brushed it off at first. Her company had always been demanding, but something didn't sit right. One evening, as Nora slipped on her heels by the front door, Jack leaned against the frame, watching her. "Another late meeting?" he asked, keeping his tone light. She adjusted her earring, avoiding his gaze. "Yeah, big client pitch tomorrow, can't miss it." Jack nodded, though a flicker of doubt crossed his mind. "You want me to keep dinner warm for you?" She waved him off with a quick smile. "Don't wait up." "Yeah." Later that night, Jack sat on the couch, his laptop open on his knees, but he wasn't working. Instead, he stared at her empty seat across the room, the silence amplifying his thoughts. He picked up his phone and typed "big client pitch" into the search bar, scrolling through headlines from her company. Nothing matched. The next morning, over coffee, he decided to push just a little. "How'd the pitch go?" Nora paused, her spoon hovering over her cereal. "What pitch?" Jack blinked. "You said you had a big pitch last night." "Oh," she said quickly, stirring her bowl. "It got moved to next week." She didn't look up, and Jack felt his stomach tighten. The explanation came too quickly, too rehearsed. Then there was the coffee with friends. Nora had always been close with her high school group, but lately, her hangouts with them seemed more frequent and strangely vague. "Who are you meeting this time?" Jack asked one Saturday morning as she gathered her purse. "Sarah," Nora replied, her tone clipped. She grabbed her keys and smiled. "Don't wait up. She's going through some stuff, so it might be a late one." Jack nodded, but his curiosity lingered. Later that evening, as he scrolled through Facebook, a post from Sarah caught his eye, a group photo from a party, dated just an hour ago. Nora wasn't in the picture. When she returned home, Jack was waiting in the kitchen. "How's Sarah?" he asked casually, pouring a glass of water. "Good," Nora said, her voice steady. "We just talked for hours." Jack set the glass down. "That's funny. She posted pictures from a party tonight." Nora froze, her smile faltering for just a second. "Oh, that. She went after we hung out." "Right," Jack said, his tone neutral though his mind churned. "Yeah." The gaps in her stories widened with every excuse. Her phone, once casually left on countertops and coffee tables, was now glued to her side. One evening while she showered, Jack noticed she'd taken it with her, something she'd never done before. "Nora," he asked one morning, "why do you keep your phone on silent all the time?" She glanced up, her expression guarded. "Work emails," she said. Too quickly. The notifications get distracting. Jack nodded, but inside, the doubt grew. Each evasive response, every pause that lingered just a beat too long, chipped away at his trust. The final straw came one night when Nora came home late again, her makeup slightly smudged, the faintest whiff of cologne clinging to her jacket. Jack didn't ask where she'd been this time. He didn't need to. Instead, he sat in silence, watching her move around the room, his mind racing. The discrepancies had piled up like bricks, building a wall between them, and Jack was no longer sure he wanted to scale it. The idea had been gnawing at Jack for days, a persistent whisper in the back of his mind, follow her. He hated himself for it. Spying on his own wife felt like a betrayal of the trust they'd built. But that trust had already been eroded by her lies, leaving him grasping for answers. It was a crisp Tuesday afternoon when the opportunity came. Nora had mentioned a quick errand after work, her tone casual but detached. Jack pretended to busy himself with his laptop as she gathered her things, slipping out the door without so much as a glance back. The moment he heard the car start, he grabbed his keys and followed. He kept his distance, his heart thundering, as he tailed her silver sedan through familiar streets. She turned left onto a quieter road, pulling into the parking lot of a small cafe. Jack parked a block away, his palms damp against the steering wheel. For a moment, he considered leaving. This wasn't who he was, suspicious, desperate, lurking in the shadows, but as Nora stepped out of her car, her phone pressed to her ear, the guilt was drowned by a wave of determination. He needed to know. Jack slipped into the cafe a few minutes after her, keeping his head low. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the soft chatter of patrons. He spotted her immediately. She sat in a corner booth, her back to him, but he recognized the curve of her shoulders, the way she toyed with the ends of her hair. A man joined her moments later. He was tall, well-dressed, with an easy confidence that grated against Jack's nerves. The man leaned in close, his smile warm, his hand resting briefly on Nora's as they exchanged greetings. Jack's chest tightened. He took a seat a few tables away, angling himself just enough to see without being seen. His mind raced as he watched them. Nora laughing, her expression unguarded in a way he hadn't seen in months. She leaned forward, her hand brushing against the man's arm. The familiarity between them was undeniable. Time seemed to slow as Jack observed every detail. The way Nora's eyes sparkled when the man spoke, the soft laughter that left her lips, the way their fingers occasionally grazed across the table. He tried to convince himself it wasn't what it seemed, but the evidence was undeniable. Then, it happened. She leaned across the table, her fingers brushing his. The man smiled, his hand covering hers briefly before pulling away. Jack's stomach dropped, a leaden weight settling in his gut. This wasn't just a meeting. Jack's breathing quickened as he forced himself to stay seated, his fists clenching under the table. His world felt like it was crumbling around him, every moment at that booth confirming his worst fears. He wanted to storm over, to demand answers, but instead he stayed frozen, his body rooted to the chair as his mind raced. Minutes passed like hours before Nora and the man stood. Jack averted his gaze, his heart hammering as they walked toward the door, their conversation soft but filled with an ease that cut deep. He waited until they were out of sight before standing, his legs unsteady beneath him. As he walked back to his car, his thoughts spiraled. Every inconsistency, every excuse, every guarded look, everything fell into place. The truth was as plain as the sunlight filtering through the cafe's windows. He climbed into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel tightly as he stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror. He didn't need any more proof. He'd seen enough. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Jack sat at the edge of the bed, staring at Nora's phone on the nightstand. She had left it there, charging, as she showered. The soft sound of running water drifted from the bathroom, each drop echoing like a taunt in his ears. His pulse quickened. He told himself he wouldn't do it, couldn't do it. But the weight of suspicion, of weeks spent unraveling in his own mind, was too much. He reached for the phone, his hand trembling. The lock screen lit up with a simple swipe. No password. She trusted him. Or maybe she'd grown careless. The Messages app stared back at him, tauntingly ordinary. His thumb hovered for a moment before tapping it open. He scrolled. Threads with coworkers, family, old friends, all innocent. But then he saw it. A contact saved only as M. His chest tightened. He tapped the thread, his heart pounding as the messages filled the screen. I can't stop thinking about last night. You looked amazing. Jack's breath caught. His eyes darted to the bathroom door, the water still running. He scrolled again, faster now. He scrolled more. When can I see you again? Tomorrow, Nora had replied, her tone playful, punctuated with a winking emoji. Same place? Jack's stomach churned. He kept scrolling, each message a dagger to his chest. Photos. His hand shook as he tapped one open. A selfie of Nora taken in the soft glow of a cafe window, her smile radiant in a way he hadn't seen in months. Another, more intimate, her hand entwined with someone else's across the table. The timestamp mocked him. He knew exactly where he'd been that day, clueless, thinking everything was fine. He swiped. More messages. Another photo. The man's face this time, grinning as he held up a wine glass, the same cafe in the background. Jack's vision blurred. His breathing was shallow, his thoughts chaotic. I swiped again. One message. Another. Miss you already, babe. My chest tightened. My throat burned. He set the phone down, his hands numb. His mind raced with every emotion. Anger, sadness, betrayal, and something sharper, darker, humiliation. She didn't just betray me, she mocked me in those messages. Made me into a joke. The shower stopped, the abrupt silence jolting him back to the room. He placed the phone back on the nightstand, his movements robotic. He'd barely made it back to his side of the bed before Nora emerged, her hair damp, wrapped in a towel. She smiled, her expression so normal, so effortless. Jack stared at her, his heart pounding, his face blank. She climbed into bed, her phone in hand, completely oblivious to what he now knew. That night, sleep didn't come. Jack lay in the darkness, the messages replaying in his mind, each word cutting deeper. The gap between them felt like an abyss now, impossible to bridge. He stared at the ceiling, his fists clenched, wondering how long she had been living this lie. The sun hung low in the sky as Jack pulled into Alex's driveway. The quiet suburban street bathed in a warm orange glow. He hadn't called ahead, but he knew Alex wouldn't mind. They had been best friends since college, the kind of friendship where showing up unannounced was never an issue. Alex opened the door, his brow furrowed as he took in Jack's strained expression. Hey man, you look like you've been through hell. What's going on? Jack hesitated, his hands jammed into his pockets. Can we talk? Alex stepped aside, gesturing him in. Of course, come on. They settled in the living room, Alex handing Jack a beer before sitting across from him. For a moment, Jack stared at the bottle, the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him like a physical burden. Finally, he spoke. It's Nora, he began, his voice tight. I know she's... He broke off, running a hand through his hair. Alex leaned forward. Jack, just say it. Jack exhaled sharply. She's cheating on me. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Alex's expression shifted from concern to quiet anger. Are you sure? Jack nodded, his jaw clenched. I followed her. Saw her with some guy at a cafe. And then I went through her phone. His voice cracked slightly. There were messages, pictures, and Alex didn't speak right away, giving Jack the space to continue. The floodgates opened, and Jack poured out everything. The late nights, the lies, the excuses. I keep asking myself if I'm crazy, Jack said, his voice trembling. Did I miss the signs all these years? Was it always like this, and I just didn't see it? Alex shook his head firmly. You're not crazy, Jack. She betrayed you, plain and simple. This isn't on you. Jack's eyes stung, but he didn't let the tears fall. But what do I do now? I can't just pretend I don't know. But I don't know how to confront her either. I don't even know if I want to. Alex leaned back, crossing his arms. You don't owe her silence. She made her choices. Now you need to make yours. Jack nodded slowly, though the clarity Alex offered didn't make the reality any easier to swallow. I can't stop thinking about everything we've built. The kids, our life. How do I throw that away? You're not throwing anything away, Alex said, his tone steady. She's the one who threw it away when she decided to lie to you. Don't put this on yourself. Jack stared at the beer in his hands, his grip tightening. I feel like an idiot, Alex. Like the whole world saw this coming except me. Alex leaned forward, his voice firm but kind. You're not an idiot. You trusted her. That's what you're supposed to do in a marriage. This isn't your failure, it's hers. The room fell silent for a moment, save for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Jack finally looked up, his expression resolute. I need to confront her. I can't keep living like this. Alex nodded. Then do it. But don't go in unprepared. Think about what you want to say, what you want to happen after, and whatever you decide, just know I've got your back. Jack managed a weak smile, the first he'd felt in days. Thanks, Alex. I don't know what I'd do without you. Alex clapped him on the shoulder. That's what I'm here for. As Jack left that evening, the air felt a little less suffocating. The path ahead was still uncertain, but he knew he wasn't facing it alone. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sliver of strength return. The idea took root slowly, like a shadow creeping across the edges of Jack's mind. At first, it felt vindictive, even cruel, but the more he turned it over, the more it felt like justice. Nora had lied, betrayed him, mocked him in messages meant for someone else. She had stripped him of his dignity, and now it was her turn to face the truth. Jack sat at the kitchen table, the glow of his laptop illuminating his face. He scrolled through emails and notes, organizing the guest list for their upcoming dinner party. The event had been Nora's idea weeks ago, a way to reconnect with friends and family. Jack had initially resisted, feeling like the cracks in their marriage were too obvious to hide. But now, the party had taken on a new purpose. He planned every detail meticulously. The invitations were already sent, and the RSVPs confirmed. Nora's sister, their closest friends, even a few of her coworkers would be there. Jack knew the weight of what he was about to do. He wasn't just confronting her, he was pulling the mask off in front of everyone who believed in the image she projected. The week leading up to the party was a blur of preparation. Jack moved through each day with a calm that surprised even him. He cooked, cleaned, and coordinated with Nora as though nothing had changed, as though he hadn't seen the messages, the photos, the lies. But beneath the surface, he was a storm. At night he lay awake, questioning himself. Was this the right way? Would this make him just as cruel as she had been? The doubts gnawed at him, but every time he thought about confronting her privately, the words caught in his throat. She had humiliated him without a second thought. He couldn't let her hide now. The day of the party arrived, and the house buzzed with activity. Nora moved through the space, setting out appetizers and arranging flowers, her demeanor cheerful and light. Jack watched her from the doorway, his stomach twisting at how easily she played the part of the devoted wife. It only solidified his resolve. As the guests began to arrive, Jack greeted them warmly, shaking hands and making small talk. He played the host effortlessly, masking the storm churning inside. Nora was radiant, laughing and chatting, the perfect image of charm. For a moment, Jack felt the weight of his plan press down on him, but then he saw her glance at her phone, her expression flickering with something she thought no one noticed. It was enough to steel him again. Dinner was served, the table filled with laughter and conversation. Jack barely touched his plate, his hands gripping his fork so tightly his knuckles turned white. He rehearsed the words in his mind, over and over, waiting for the right moment. Finally, as the main course was being cleared, he stood. Before we get to dessert, he said, his voice steady but carrying an edge that silenced the room, I just want to say how much I appreciate everyone being here tonight. It's been a difficult few months, and having you all here means a lot. The guests murmured their agreement, their attention fully on him now. Jack glanced at Nora, who smiled, unaware of what was coming next. But there's something I need to address, he continued, his gaze locking onto hers. Her smile faltered. "Nora, do you want to tell everyone about your lover, or should I?" The room fell into stunned silence. Nora's face went pale, her mouth opening as if to speak, but no words came out. Jack reached into his pocket, pulling out a stack of printed messages and photos. He laid them on the table in front of her. "I wanted you to feel exposed," he said, his voice calm but laced with a quiet fury. "Just like I did." The room seemed to hold its breath as the weight of his words settled over everyone. The morning of the dinner party dawned crisp and clear, sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows as Jack stood at the counter, slicing lemons for the drinks. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and Nora hummed softly as she arranged a tray of appetizers. To anyone watching, they looked like a perfectly content couple preparing for an evening with friends. But Jack's mind was a battlefield. He moved through the motions with practiced ease, nodding and responding to Nora's cheerful chatter. She talked about the guest list, the menu, and the new centerpiece she had picked up for the dining table. Her voice was light, her demeanor carefree, as if the world hadn't just cracked open under their feet. Jack forced a smile, his hands steady even as a storm raged inside him. Every laugh, every casual comment from Nora felt like a knife twisting deeper. She had no idea what was coming, no inkling that the man helping her plan this evening was the same man who had read every incriminating word she'd exchanged with her lover. As the afternoon wore on, the house came together. Jack vacuumed the living room, rearranged chairs, and lit candles, all while maintaining a calm, almost detached facade. He knew the routine by heart. Hosting was something he and Nora had done countless times over the years, but this time, every detail carried a sharper edge. By late afternoon, the table was set, the wine chilling in an ice bucket. Jack took a step back to survey the scene. It was perfect. Too perfect. The irony wasn't lost on him. The pristine tablecloth, the flickering candlelight. It all felt like a stage set for a tragedy. The doorbell rang, jolting him from his thoughts. The first guests had arrived. Nora swept past him to answer, her smile radiant as she greeted their friends. Jack followed, shaking hands and making small talk, his voice steady despite the fury simmering beneath the surface. More guests trickled in, filling the house with laughter and conversation. Nora was in her element, pouring drinks and guiding people to the living room. She laughed, her voice melodic and carefree, completely unaware of the storm brewing just behind Jack's composed expression. At one point, Jack watched her from across the room. She stood by the bar cart, chatting animatedly with one of her co-workers. Her hands moved gracefully as she poured wine, her laughter ringing out like a melody. It struck Jack how normal she looked, how effortlessly she wore the mask of a loving wife, even as the evidence of her betrayal burned a hole in his pocket. Her tone and dress, her heart in her eyes. She poured drinks, laughing as if the world hadn't just shattered, Jack thought, his grip tightening on the glass in his hand. Dinner was announced, and the guests gathered around the table, their voices overlapping in cheerful conversation. Nora took her seat at the head, her smile warm as she toasted to friendship and good food. Jack raised his glass along with everyone else, his face betraying none of the turmoil inside. As the meal progressed, Jack played his part perfectly, engaging in light banter and sharing anecdotes with their guests. Every laugh felt hollow, every word a struggle to push past the lump in his throat. But he kept going, knowing the moment of truth was drawing closer. Nora remained oblivious, her charm on full display. She leaned into conversations, her laughter lighting up the room, her movements graceful and deliberate. Jack watched her, the contrast between her ease and his simmering rage almost surreal. By the time dessert was served, the air in the room had shifted. The laughter and chatter had taken on a softer, more intimate tone. Jack could feel the weight of his own resolve pressing down on him, the moment he had been preparing for finally at hand. He glanced at Nora, who caught his eye and smiled, completely unaware. Jack's stomach twisted, but his face remained impassive. He set down his glass and stood, the room falling silent as he prepared to deliver the truth. The hum of laughter and clinking glasses filled the dining room as the guests settled back in their seats, dessert plates scraped clean. Jack's heart thudded in his chest, the sound almost deafening to him as he stood. He could feel every set of eyes on him, expectant, curious. "Before we wrap up tonight," he began, his voice steady but tinged with an edge that made the room quiet, "I want to say a few words." Nora looked up at him, her smile still in place but faintly puzzled. "Jack, what's this about?" she asked lightly, though there was a flicker of something unease in her tone. Jack ignored the question, scanning the faces around the table. These were the people closest to them, family, friends, colleagues, people who believed in the illusion of their marriage. He swallowed hard, his resolve hardening. "This evening is about truth," he said, his eyes locking onto Nora's, "and I think it's time we all heard some." The room stilled, the air thick with tension. Nora shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her smile faltering. "Jack," she said, her voice low, "maybe this isn't the time." "No," Jack cut in, his voice sharp but controlled. "This is the perfect time." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small stack of papers. The motion seemed slow and deliberate, his every move calculated. Nora's eyes flicked to the stack, her face paling as realization began to set in. "Nora," Jack said, his tone calm but loaded with anger just beneath the surface, "care to explain these messages?" Her breath caught, and she opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The silence was deafening. The guests exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what to make of the sudden shift in atmosphere. "Jack," Nora finally managed, her voice shaky, "please, not here. Let's talk privately." "No," Jack said, his tone resolute. "Here's perfect." He dropped the papers onto the table, the incriminating texts and photos spilling out for everyone to see. A few guests leaned forward, their faces etched with confusion and shock as they read the damning words. "This," Jack said, his voice rising slightly as he pointed at the evidence, "is what you've been doing while I've been at home with our kids, thinking everything was fine. These messages, these photos," he paused, his gaze drilling into her. "This is your lover, isn't it? Mike? Or should I say, Mr. Business Trip?" Nora's face went white, her hands trembling as she reached for the papers, as if snatching them could undo the damage already done. "Jack, I can explain," she stammered, her voice cracking. "It's not what it looks like." Jack laughed, a bitter, humorless sound that made a few guests flinch. "It's exactly what it looks like, Nora. Do you think I didn't see the way you've been sneaking around? Do you think I didn't notice the late nights, the excuses, the lies?" One of her coworkers, seated near the end of the table, cleared his throat awkwardly. "I think maybe we should give you two some privacy." "No," Jack snapped, his voice cutting through the room. "She didn't care about privacy when she betrayed me. Why should I give her that now?" Nora's sister, sitting closest to her, placed a tentative hand on her arm. "Nora," she said softly, her voice laced with disbelief. "Is this true?" Nora's eyes brimmed with tears as she shook her head, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered. "I made a mistake." "A mistake?" Jack interrupted, his voice rising. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or burning dinner? This," he gestured to the papers, "this is a choice, repeated, over and over." The room descended into chaos. Guests muttered among themselves, their shock and discomfort palpable. Some stood to leave, others looked at Nora with a mix of pity and disdain. Jack remained standing, his jaw clenched, as he fought to keep his composure. Nora finally rose from her chair, her tears spilling over. "Jack," she pleaded, "please, we can fix this. Let's go somewhere and talk." "There's nothing to fix," Jack said coldly, his voice devoid of emotion. "You didn't just betray me, Nora. You betrayed everyone here who believed in you, who believed in us." With that, Jack turned to the stunned guests. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he said, his voice steady once more. "I think the party's over." Without waiting for a response, he walked out of the dining room, his steps measured and purposeful. Behind him, Nora's sobs echoed faintly, but he didn't look back. The confrontation was done, but the real fallout had only just begun. The room buzzed with murmurs, the weight of Jack's revelation settling over the stunned guests. Forks clinked against plates, chairs scraped the floor, and a few hushed voices filled the silence. Nora stood frozen, her face streaked with tears, her hands clutching the damning papers Jack had thrown onto the table. Nora's sister was the first to move. She stood slowly, glancing between Jack and Nora, her expression a mix of disbelief and pity. I think I should go," she murmured, grabbing her coat. That was all it took for the others to follow. One by one, the guests excused themselves, their expressions tight with discomfort. "I can't believe this," one muttered under their breath. "Let's give them some space," another said as they ushered their partner toward the door. Within minutes, the once lively dining room was nearly empty, the laughter and camaraderie replaced by a suffocating silence. Nora broke first. As the last of the guests shuffled out, she crumpled into her chair, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "Jack, please," she choked out, her voice barely audible. "Let me explain." Jack stood by the doorway, his back to her, his fists clenched at his sides, his body rigid. He didn't move, didn't speak. He simply stared ahead, the sound of her sobs grating against his ears. "Please," she cried, louder this time. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I didn't mean to hurt you." He turned slowly, his face devoid of emotion. "You didn't mean to hurt me?" he repeated, his voice sharp and cold. "Every time you lied, every time you snuck around, you didn't think about how it would hurt me? Don't insult me, Nora." She stood shakily, reaching for him. "I love you, Jack. I do. This was a mistake, a horrible mistake." He stepped back, avoiding her touch. "Stop," he said, his voice low but firm. "Don't try to fix this with words. Not after everything." Her sobs grew louder, filling the empty room. Jack's gaze swept over the remnants of the dinner party, the half-empty glasses, the scattered plates, the candles that had burned low. The scene felt surreal, like a stage set for a play he hadn't agreed to star in. Finally, he spoke again, his voice steady and resolute. "This wasn't just the end of a dinner party, Nora. It's the end of us." She gasped, her hands flying to her mouth as fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "No," she whispered, "don't say that. We can fix this. We have to. For the kids, for everything we've built." Jack shook his head, his expression unmoving. "The kids deserve better than this. Better than lies. Better than watching their parents pretend to be something we're not." He turned toward the door, his footsteps echoing in the quiet house. Nora called after him, her voice desperate, broken. "Don't walk away, Jack. Please, don't do this." But he didn't stop. He didn't look back. Her cries faded as he stepped into the night, the cool air hitting him like a slap. He stood on the front porch for a moment, his chest rising and falling with deep, measured breaths. The stillness of the neighborhood contrasted sharply with the chaos inside, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. As he walked toward his car, his mind raced. He thought about the years they had spent together, the memories they had built, the promises they had made. All of it shattered in a single evening. But beneath the heartbreak, there was something else. Relief. The truth was out, and though it hurt, it was better than the suffocating web of lies he had been trapped in. Jack opened the car door and slid into the driver's seat. For a moment, he just sat there, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his eyes staring out into the empty street. The night felt endless, the future uncertain. But one thing was clear. He couldn't go back. He started the car, the engine's hum breaking the silence. As he drove away, the house grew smaller in his rearview mirror, the faint glow of the dining room lights fading into the darkness. A single thought echoed in his mind, steady and final. This was the beginning of the end, and maybe, just maybe, the start of something new. The morning after the dinner party, Jack stood in the kitchen, staring blankly at a cup of coffee he couldn't bring himself to drink. The house was unnervingly quiet. Nora had stayed in the guest room, her sobs muffled but audible through the walls. Jack hadn't slept. He'd spent the night replaying the events, the words, the pain. By the end of the week, Jack filed for divorce. The paperwork sat heavily in his hands, a tangible reminder of the unraveling of their lives. He didn't hate Nora, not entirely, but the betrayal was too great to ignore. He had to protect himself and the kids. even if it meant tearing apart the life they had built. The harder part was yet to come. One evening, Jack sat on the couch with his children. Emily was snuggled close, clutching her stuffed rabbit, while her older brother Liam sat cross-legged on the floor, his face tense with confusion. Jack had rehearsed what he would say, but now, staring into their wide, innocent eyes, the words felt stuck. "Dad, why can't you and Mom live together anymore?" Liam finally asked, his voice small but direct. Jack took a deep breath. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," he began, choosing his words carefully. "Big mistakes that hurt the people they care about." "Did you make a mistake?" Emily asked, her voice muffled as she clung to him. "No, sweetheart," Jack said softly, "but your mom and we can't stay together anymore. It's not because we don't love you. We both love you so much. But sometimes staying together isn't what's best." The kids didn't cry immediately. Liam nodded slowly, his face scrunched in thought, while Emily burrowed deeper into Jack's side. Their silence broke Jack more than any tears could have. Later that night, as he tucked them into bed, Emily whispered, "Will you still be here in the morning?" Jack's chest tightened. He leaned down, brushing a kiss against her forehead. "Always," he promised. "I'll always be here for you." As he closed the door to their room, he felt a sliver of determination take root. He had to be strong. For them. For himself. In the weeks that followed, Jack took steps to reclaim his life. He started therapy, the sessions offering him a safe space to unpack the pain and confusion. At first, he struggled to open up, but slowly he began to share his fears, his anger, his heartbreak. "I wasn't just healing," Jack admitted to his therapist one day. "I was rediscovering who I was, who I am without her." Outside therapy, Jack turned to the things he had once loved but had neglected over the years. He dusted off his old hiking boots, venturing into the woods where the quiet offered him clarity. He found solace in writing, filling notebooks with his thoughts, emotions, and even the beginnings of a novel. The process wasn't linear. There were days when the weight of it all felt unbearable, when memories of Nora's laugh or their children's birthdays threatened to pull him under. But those days grew fewer, replaced by moments of light, of progress. One morning, while hiking a familiar trail, Jack paused at a cliffside overlooking the valley. The sun was rising, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, feeling the cool air fill his lungs. The cracks in my life didn't disappear, he thought, but they were filling with something stronger: resilience. He smiled for the first time in weeks, the kind of smile that came from within. Jack wasn't whole yet, but he was getting there, step by step, rediscovering the man he wanted to be. The crisp mountain air filled Jack's lungs as he adjusted his backpack and glanced over his shoulder at Emily and Liam. The kids were a few steps behind, their laughter echoing through the trees as they raced each other up the trail. Sunlight filtered through the canopy above, dappling the path with warm, golden hues. It had been months since the divorce was finalized, and Jack had been determined to create new memories with his children, ones untainted by the shadows of the past. Today's hike was part of that effort, a chance to step away from the routines of their new reality and reconnect with one another. "Dad, wait up," Emily called, her little legs struggling to keep pace with Liam. Jack smiled and slowed, letting her catch up. "You doing okay, Em?" he asked, crouching to her level. She nodded, her cheeks flushed from exertion. "I want to see the top." "We'll get there," Jack promised, ruffling her hair. "Just keep going, one step at a time." They continued the ascent, the sounds of the forest enveloping them in a peaceful rhythm. Birds chirped in the distance, leaves rustled in the breeze, and the occasional crunch of their boots on the gravelly path added a steady cadence to the climb. Jack watched his children in quiet awe, their energy and resilience reminding him of the strength they'd all found together. When they reached the overlook, the view was breathtaking. The valley below stretched wide, its green expanse dotted with wildflowers and winding streams. The mountains in the distance stood tall and proud, their peaks kissed by the clouds. Jack dropped his backpack and sat on a large rock, letting the serenity of the scene wash over him. Emily and Liam plopped down beside him, their faces lit with excitement. "It's so pretty," Emily exclaimed, leaning against Jack's side. "It's amazing," Liam agreed, his tone more subdued but no less awed. Jack wrapped an arm around each of them, pulling them close. For a moment, they sat in silence, simply taking it all in. It wasn't just the view, it was the stillness, the clarity that came from stepping away from the noise of everyday life. As they began their descent, Jack felt lighter. The weight of the past hadn't disappeared, but it no longer pressed so heavily on his shoulders. The laughter of his children, the joy of the moment, they were reminders that life moves forward, even after heartbreak. The road ahead wasn't easy, Jack thought, glancing at Emily and Liam as they bounded down the trail, but it was mine to walk, and I wasn't walking it alone. He smiled to himself, the warmth of the sun on his face matching the hope blooming in his chest. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't seem so daunting. It seemed possible, and that was enough. It arrived on an unremarkable afternoon, buried between utility bills and promotional flyers. Jack almost missed it as he shuffled through the mail, his mind preoccupied with the grocery list and the kids' soccer schedules. But the handwriting on the envelope stopped him cold. It was unmistakably Nora's. He sat at the kitchen table, the unopened envelope resting in front of him. His fingers hovered over it for a moment before he carefully tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. Jack unfolded it slowly, his chest tightening as he began to read. "Jack,